Hello, you are very welcome to December's Aware webinar. We'll just wait a few moments to allow as many people to enter, and then we'll start. So just wait another minute to allow people to enter. So I'm delighted to welcome you to December's Aware webinar. As those of you who are familiar with this will know, this is a monthly series. And this month we're looking at shining a light on depression in winter. And we can't take credit for organizing a storm over Ireland in the last day or two, but my goodness, this is very, very topical. And I'm delighted and absolutely thrilled to welcome Annette Byrne. And I'll talk about how I know and have come to really respect and love, if I can use that word, Annette, for so many reasons. But first of all, for those of you who aren't familiar with Aware, Aware is an organization that was set up in 1985 to support people who have depression or bipolar disorder. It was set up by Dr. Patrick McKeown with the support of volunteers. And one of the wonderful things about this webinar is that Annette is representing herself, obviously, and her own experiences of depression, but also the volunteers and Aware. So Annette, I'm really delighted to welcome you, and I'd like you to introduce yourself first, and then, as I said, if you don't give yourself enough credit, then I will add to it.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. As you say, my name is Annette. I've been a volunteer with Aware for more years than I care to remember. But it all started back in the early 90s at a stage in my life where I was experiencing something which I discovered later on to be depression. I had gone through a period of a number of years of losses and changes, and I was in a very stressful job. And suddenly, I just don't know how I felt. I felt very confused. I was tired all the time. I was finding it very difficult to concentrate. I went to my GP, and he advised me to take some time out. But because of the nature of my job at the time, I didn't feel I could do that. So I struggled on and struggled on. And I just wasn't looking after myself at all. And eventually I ended up in hospital. But I was very fortunate in that I was recommended to an excellent psychiatrist. And during the course of a couple of sessions with her, the word depression came up, and this terrified me because back then nobody talked about depression and there was a real taboo. And we think today that there's a stigma around depression. Back then, just wasn't spoken about, or it was spoken about in hushed tones and nervous breakdowns. And but eventually, she suggested to me, I had loads of questions. I was always asking her, how did I get depression? When am I going to be cured? What's the story here? So she said, look, I think you should go along to Aware. I think you should go along and maybe you'd find out answers to some of the questions that you've been asking me. Because she did mention to me that depression was an illness that needed to be managed. So I was saying to myself, well, how can I manage something that I, first of all, don't understand how I got it? And secondly, if I don't know enough about it, I'm not going to be able to manage it. So off I went to Aware. And I'm delighted to say that one of the first people I met in Aware was a facilitator called Elaine, and she's a good friend of mine to today. And that's one of the wonderful things about Aware. You make such fantastic friends. But what I learned in the support groups was a lot of things that I was experiencing that I didn't realize were classic symptoms of depression. I then decided I better go to some of the lectures, because they always promoted the lectures in the support group. And, you know, people were saying how beneficial they were. So I started to go to the lectures. And bit by bit, I think I made better use of my visits to my doctor, because I actually told her what was happening. Okay, it took a number of years to stabilize my mood, but thankfully I did. My mood was stabilized, and I've been very well in the years following, despite other ups and downs. But however, when there is a blip, I know what to do, because I've learned how to manage my experience of depression.
And Annette, I knew you'd be very modest in what you've said. So I would like to add into that in your journey through Aware, you chose to train as a facilitator yourself. And then you chose to go on the board of Aware. And then you were chairperson of Aware for a number of years. And that's how I met you first, because in your capacity as chairperson, you invited me to join the board. And I remember us having a really nice cup of coffee where you were interviewing me to see if I was okay to go on the board. And I knew that's what you were doing, but it was a real pleasure and a privilege, and continues to be. And Annette, I'm just struck by how open and brave you are to go in this public webinar, which is being videoed, to talk about not just Aware, but your own experiences. And you mentioned there in terms of blips, and you recognize the signs. And I know people watching will really be interested in knowing, well, what are they and how do you do it? And we've spoken before, and part of the Aware lectures, which the webinars are now replacing, because we can't meet face to face. But there used to be a Christmas, December Aware webinar with Shining Light for Christmas. So it can be a very difficult time of year. So anything that I'm going to really not suck your wisdom out of you, but facilitate you in sharing your wisdom. And also to mention to people who are watching that you're very open to questions. And if there are some that maybe it's more appropriate for me to answer as a clinical psychologist, I'm very happy to do that too. But putting it back to you, Annette, in terms of what you'd like to say in terms of how you'd recognize depression and your understanding of it, and not just from your own experience, but through all your experience with Aware, and then what you'd recommend for each of us to do to keep ourselves as well as we can do at this time. So you are the torch right now. You're like the Statue of Liberty, shining the light, if that's the right metaphor to use.
Yeah. Well, in Aware, as you know, Claire, we have used the word festival to describe the symptoms of depression. And, you know, for fear I'd get them wrong, I had printed out the list off our website. But very much, I mean, everybody's experience is probably different, because it's a very confusing illness. And I suppose you asked me about me, what would be the signs for me? And one of the first signs for me would be anxiety. I'd have this feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I'd be anxious about everything. And suddenly I'd be indecisive. I find it extremely difficult to make decisions. And that would be because I think my concentration would be impaired. And I often heard it said at lectures, and particularly by Dr. McKeown, that depression in any form, be it bipolar or depression, it's an illness of energy. And I mean, if you have in a depression, if you're very, very tired, you're so tired that if you're in a conversation with somebody, you're not taking in really what they're saying. And if you don't take it in, you're not going to be able to remember it. So it's very hard then to repeat something to somebody if they ask you about something they know, maybe somewhere you were, or something you were at, or something you heard on the radio, and you're finding it very difficult to repeat it because you really weren't concentrating. So they were the kind of symptoms I would have. As I say, tiredness, indecision, anxiety, and lack of concentration. But for other people, it might be a loss of interest in everything. It might be sleep, oversleeping or undersleeping. What I didn't realize, and it was somebody in my group told me, when I was going through that very bad phase, I was going to bed exhausted, going to sleep, but maybe waking up at 4 a.m. and being wide awake and not being able to get back to sleep. And I didn't realize that can be a classic symptom of depression. So for everybody, maybe the symptoms are different, but now unfortunately, it hasn't happened to me too often, but a couple of times it has happened to me that I feel that my mood is slipping. It takes me a little while to maybe accept the situation. I'd be in denial. Denial is a very big part of depression. And eventually, though, I'd say cop on and go to the doctor. And oftentimes it would be, I would need medication, because I'm lucky medication works for me, because I discovered way after I experienced depression that there's depression in my family, on both sides of the family, in my parents' generation, in my grandparents' generation, and even in my great-grandparents' generation, because one of my cousins did a bit of a family history, and we discovered that there was, well, we didn't know what it was called, but we reckon it was depression back then. So I always feel I have a predisposition to depression. So it occasionally will need medication.
So, and Annette, just to explain, you know this, when I put my glasses on, it's that I'm just checking the questions and answers box.
Yeah.
So it's not that I'm not listening at all. So you might see my head nod, or go down. So I just want to do that in a moment. But I just want to follow on from a word that you used a few times there, because I know some people really like it and with regards to depression, and some people really don't like it with regards to depression. And that's the use of the word illness. And for some people, they would think, well, yes, I have an illness. And other people might say, I have a condition, or I experience depression. And in my own experience working with people, sometimes being told that they have an illness and given medication can really be hugely helpful, because I think this is great. If I broke my arm, I'd pain and I'd get it fixed. Other people see it, though, more in terms of a weakness, or that there's something wrong with them. So what I found very helpful in my understanding of depression is a bio-psychosocial approach. So as you've described really well there, the biological component. So having maybe a genetic disposition or predisposition. So our hormones can be affected, and all the chemicals are, we're not getting enough of the serotonin in the winter, or whatever it is, and can respond really well to medication. But then there's this psychological aspect, the thinking we're not good enough, the pessimism, and that can be learned. So a little 3-year-old child can learn if an adult's looking out the window going, oh, it's raining, or, oh my goodness, look at the rain, let's get the wellies and splash in the puddle. And that's only one snippet. But if a child is exposed to pessimistic view through life and in the early years, he or she could have more a tendency to develop depression. And then the social aspect, and this is something we all know about in the last 2 years, where we're missing the meeting. Like now, this conversation, we're meeting on Zoom rather than in person. And I can't remember, Annette, when we last had our catch-up cup of coffee, but it's at least 2 years ago and long overdue.
Longer, Claire.
Yes, yes. So the social aspect of it, and then it's easier for people to withdraw. And in winter, there can be a tendency of that too. So it can be a complicated kind of thing. And so I just want to check. So there's 4 questions at the moment. And somebody's saying, yes, exactly what we were just saying and what you said, Annette. Going through anxiety and a low mood at present, isolate, doesn't do the workshop. So what does that person need to do to set a goal? And the person is saying that they are taking medication correctly. What would your response be to that?
That action precedes motivation.
Okay, can you explain a little bit more about that? I know
Well,
that's...
I learned that in my group, that if you're to sit around waiting, when you're at that stage of feeling anxious or down, if you're to wait to feel, oh, I'd love to do that, or oh, I'll go for a walk, or oh, great, it's coffee time, it won't happen. Sadly, it won't happen, because there's a certain cruelty attached to depression. It tells you, no, you can't do that, or why would you do that? Or so really to set yourself maybe a couple of tasks in the day. Now, things that you can achieve, not impossible things. We often described in groups how if a person had a broken leg, you wouldn't ask them to go out and dig the garden. But with somebody with a severe depression, or even just a mild to moderate feeling of anxiety and low mood, it would be just as hard for them. They wouldn't be able, they wouldn't have the energy, back to this being a condition that is bound around energy. Too much of it if you're elated, and too little of it if you're depressed. So really to give yourself a couple of challenges that you'll try and achieve during the day, and maybe write them down so that you can tick them off, but don't beat yourself up if you didn't achieve them. Even to do one is an achievement.
Yes.
Definitely the act of doing something positive will help, yes. Particularly a walk, because going out in the fresh air and exercising is very, very helpful.
And, I always add on to that, Annette, too, that while we're going out for the walk, to manage our own thoughts, because if we're beating ourselves up, if we're thinking, oh, I've put on weight, or I'm not walking as fast as I used to, or I've just walked past that person and I should have said hello. So if we have that kind of a beating ourselves up conversation, then that's not as helpful as if we're saying, gosh, it's great to be out. And I'm just conscious, Annette, that I think you corrected yourself there. I think you were about to say illness and you said condition.
And I better do, Claire.
Not at all. Not at all. And just to clarify, Aware is very, very much focused on supporting people with bipolar disorder. And bipolar disorder, as we know, is an illness. So the word is very appropriate as well. Mm-hmm. And as we know, people with bipolar disorder, as you've described, they can swing from feeling in great mood to feeling in very low mood. And that can be very, very difficult. I remember a wonderful woman involved with Aware for years who said to me once that she found it very difficult to be in good form because her what's called spotters, people who would let her know that, we think you're just slipping, we think, and she said they wouldn't ever say, we think you're getting into bad form, or you're very down, or you're very low. But she said she found it very, very difficult. So you've described some of the benefits of the Aware support groups. And I know when Aware was set up initially, that and what was then called the helpline were the key services. Yes. And there are other services that Aware provides that we'll come back to talk about. But I just want to check, my list here is getting up. So this lady here has a question. Find doctors, even mental health doctors, just want to give medication, which just makes me feel like a zombie here. And she's mentioned part of a country, Donegal, and the mental health services are very bad, especially for older people. So and then the next one is related. Somebody saying she wants to help someone close with depression, and without medication, are there other techniques? So what would you say, Annette?
Absolutely. Well, I think the first thing is to have a frank discussion with your doctor. And if you're concerned about the medication, discuss with your doctor your reasons for not wanting to be on medication. Or maybe that person said that they felt like a zombie. Well, maybe the medication was wrong or the dose was wrong. But there's certainly our CBT program is very valuable. Even simple things like breathing exercises, which we always recommend, and I know you recommend, Claire. Exercise, diet, avoiding, too much caffeine. There's lots of other things, or, counseling. And there's a lot of that information on our website. And for that person supporting a relative, I think there's a great list on the website of what have I tried already. And it's a list for relatives, friends, or colleagues who are trying to support somebody. I know it's often said, oh my God, will I say the wrong thing? Or their mood is off and, I just don't know how to start the conversation. But this list is terrific, and you can tick off, well, I tried that, it didn't work. Oh, I didn't try that. So that's very helpful, and that can be very helpful for relatives, because I think it's extremely difficult for a relative when they're supporting somebody who is moderately depressed. And I think just to be there for them, you know, to say, look, I'm here to listen. Anytime you feel like chatting, I'm here to listen. And it's not your job to fix them. It's just your job to support and to be there.
Yes. And one of the webinars we had earlier in the year was with Joe Parlin and his wife, Mary. And Joe was very open about his experiences of depression, Annette, and his wife, Mary, talking about how the challenge is for her to support him. So that's recorded and that's on the Aware website. And also the course that Aware provides for relatives and friends. So that, yes, that's there as well. Annette, we've got two comments in the chat box, and I just like to ask people, if they don't mind, to just use the question and answers, because otherwise I'm going to be I'm afraid I'll miss something. But I want to read this. This is from a lady, and she sent it to everyone, so everyone knows it except you. I really admire Annette for her courage to be so open. This helps me to be open too about my own experience of anxiety and depression. And Annette, I know this isn't something that you maybe woke up this morning and said, wow, this is brilliant. You know, so it's not that it might come easily to you. And I know when I asked you, your immediate reaction was, oh no, because I know you're extremely humble about it, and maybe there's someone else who, you know, would do a better job. So which of course there isn't. So with that, I just really want to acknowledge how incredibly useful and helpful, and there's somebody straight away saying it. And the more people who are open about, the more we are all open about our own experiences, then it's easier to have a real conversation. And then the second person is on the chat, and then I'll close the chat. And I think Karen might be able to disable that and we just use question and answers. But is somebody asking, and this is a personal question, Annette, to you, but we can generalize it as well if you like. Do you follow any particular diet or find that certain foods can affect your mood?
I don't. I follow a healthy eating regime because I found that I put on weight very easily. And back in the day when I was trying all kinds of different medications to stabilize my mood, I did have a tendency, I put on an awful lot of weight. And that was something I had to handle afterwards. And yes, I think putting on weight can lower your mood because you don't feel as well, you're not as agile, and you don't feel you look as well, and you start being very negative with yourself. Oh gosh, you know, there I go again, why can't I stay slim? But it's not that I find that any particular food affects my mood, but I do try to follow a healthy eating regime.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Annette. And I find sugar affects my mood, you know, and it might give me what I think is a lot more energy, and I can just have a slump afterwards. And we know that sugar can be addictive.
Yes, yeah.
As, you know, as caffeine, as alcohol, as, you know, all the substances that we put into our bodies without thinking about it. And you know what, that's a nice introduction to Christmas and the season coming towards us, because there's so much, we're just bombarded with so much of stuff.
Yes, it's everywhere.
So maybe I can just check. So medication doesn't suit me. What alternatives are there? So you've answered that, and I might come back to that. Somebody commenting that he thinks depression is a change of state rather than an illness. So that's why I wanted to address that with you, Annette. It wasn't in any way to keep you quiet. It was just to bring in, you know, that there are other views. So somebody is talking about struggling to focus and keep up at work. Spoken to the manager, waiting to get a doctor's appointment. Is there something else I can do to try and help get that focus back?
I think to not be too hard on yourself. As we said earlier about, you know, setting yourself tasks that you can achieve. And I don't know whether that person is working from home or working in an office setup. The breathing exercises that we recommend in Aware are very, very helpful because it kind of calms you down and maybe gives you a chance to focus. But I mean, it is, I can appreciate where that person's coming from. It is extremely difficult to focus when your mood is off because it does affect your concentration.
Annette, would you be okay if we just practiced one breathing exercise I particularly like?
Yes.
And it involves, if you tighten your, and people have heard me say this before, but it might seem a good time to do it again. If you tighten your non-dominant hand into a fist and breathe in and hold your breath 2, 3 and breathe out and open your hand as you breathe out. And if we do it twice more, so tighten, breathe in, hold your breath 2, 3 and breathe out. And then once more, tightening, breathing in, holding your breath 2, 3 and breathing out. Now, if you do it 3 more times, Annette, please, and think deliberately this thought, and I'll tell you what it is. So tighten, breathe in. I choose to breathe slowly, hold 2, 3, and breathing out. And open your hand, perfect. So twice more, breathing in, thinking, I choose to breathe slowly, hold 2, 3, and breathing out. And then once more, breathing in, I choose to breathe slowly, hold 2, 3, and breathing out. Annette, did you notice any difference in your breathing from the second set compared to the first set of 3?
Yes, you notice that you calm down. I did that several times this morning, Claire.
And what we did actually before coming on air, we distracted. We talked about all different kinds of things because there was no point in me saying, Annette, you're going to be great, you're going to be fine. That doesn't help with anxiety because that's reassurance, and reassurance tends not to work if we don't believe it. So what does work really, really well is a distraction. Talk about something completely different. So we talked about books that we like, or I talked about a book I like actually. And then we didn't have time to move on to the next one. So one of the reasons I love that exercise though, Annette, is the tightening our hand gives us something to do. Yeah. So if we're in a situation where we're feeling, under pressure, and then if we say relax, what do we do? But if we tighten our hand and then relax, it's like an elastic band that stretches and then it comes back. And then the thought, I choose to breathe slowly. I love the power of the word choose. If we think I have to, that's pressure. I need to is pressure. I must, I should is a judgment. I will try, but I don't think I'll be able to. Very simply, I choose to breathe slowly. So if we're in a challenging situation or we're faced with someone we think is about to criticize us or judge us, or even heading into a shop to buy Christmas cards or whatever it is that might be difficult for us, I choose to breathe slowly. And Annette, I just want to keep an eye. Oh, I'm just enjoying this because we've got loads of time for comments and questions. Somebody saying it values how open you are about depression. And then there's a question here. And Annette, if any of the questions you think, oh, Claire, look, don't be landing it, just pass them back to me. And if I'm not able, then that's fine too. We'll let the person know. So there's a question here. Is there a way that a mother of an 18-year-old daughter with an eating disorder can support her now that she's starting to find it difficult to get out of bed some days?
Oh, again, I suppose that's an extremely difficult one. And I think an eating disorder, particularly at this time of the year, must be very difficult. But again, I suppose it's just that encouragement. I'm there for you. Not pressurizing the daughter, but telling her, you'll do anything you can to help. And do it as calmly. But also, I think a very important thing is for that mother to look after herself. Because, that's very, very stressful. And probably other family members, and you're trying to do all the nice things for Christmas and know this might be posing difficulties for that one daughter. So really to be mindful of your own health at this time. And as they tell you on an airplane, if the cabin pressure is going to change and the oxygen masks come down, you put on your own one first, because if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to help anybody else. So it's really just letting your daughter know you're there for her.
I agree completely, Annette. And just to add to that as well, I think the more information that somebody who's facing to cope with an eating disorder, the more information they know about it, the better. And our colleagues in Bodywise, the charity to support people with eating disorders, have lots and lots of information. And we're in contact with them, and we will, we've had previous lectures with Jacinta, their CEO, and we certainly will be valuing their input into aware support in the year ahead. But just encouraging people to do that. And I read Ivana Lynch's book recently on her experiences of eating disorders when she was 11 and 12. And Ivana, as people might know, is Luna in Harry Potter. And she gives a really stark account of her experiences and how challenging it can be. It's not a book I recommend for someone who's experiencing an eating disorder, especially not an 18-year-old. But I think for a parent of an 18-year-old, I think it would be a really good read, because it's just such a difficult condition. So thank you for that, Annette. And the glasses go back on. And so much respect for Annette and her commitment to aware and helping others. Has Annette any pointers for working on acceptance? Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me and convinces me that I don't need to be doing consistent work on my mental health regularly.
Yes. I always say that acceptance is easy when you're well, but acceptance is not very easy when your mood is a bit off. And that's what we all had to work on. And I think it's through support. It really is. I have my go-to people in Aware that if I wasn't well, or if I was having a bad day, or if life was tough, that I could ring them and talk to them, and they know what we're talking about. It's great, and we can support one another. And I mean, there's no easy way, because the thing about depression is it's still so misunderstood. If I said to you I had diabetes and I had to manage it, you'd have a fair idea of what I needed to do to manage my diabetes. You'd say, take your insulin, be very careful of what foods you eat, etc., etc. But if I say to you, I have depression and I have to manage it, the majority of people don't know what to say to you. So that's where I find that you have to learn acceptance for yourself, and you know, not be embarrassed by it. But I mean, it's okay for me at this stage in my life. I'm semi-retired. They know in the office, they've never experienced me having depression, but you know, they're very supportive of Aware. But for somebody young, you know, or that are the middle of their career, it is another thing. It's very difficult. But I mean, you do have to manage your mental health in the same way as you would manage a physical condition.
Yes, yes, absolutely. There are a few definitions of depression, Annette, I find very helpful. One is anger turned inwards.
Yeah.
And sometimes people can get taken aback if someone is beginning to acknowledge they have depression and get help, that suddenly they seem angry in a way that they didn't before. But that can be a really good sign. Another can be a sense of hopelessness about the self, the world, the future. There's no point. What's the point? I can't do it. Being very hard. And then the third is a learned helplessness. And that's Professor Martin Seligman in the States, his way of understanding depression. And we know it's very common. It used to be called, or probably still is, the common cold of psychiatry. People can come out of depression without any help. But medication and or treatment such as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which the Aware's life skills courses are very much focused on, they're free. They're teaching people ways of managing their thoughts, acknowledging their feelings, and really focusing on action that can help. So I encourage anyone who's experiencing depression, or anyone who wants to learn more about them, to do those courses. One is an 8-session course developed by Professor Chris Williams in the UK. Another is a 6-session course developed specifically for online by Dr. John Shary in The Matter and his colleagues in Silvercloud. Both of them, and the 8-session one is now online as well, will give people a really good sense of it. And if I can just add in there, you've acknowledged, every time you've got a question, Annette, you've started with acknowledging how difficult it is, acknowledging how hard it is. So I've developed a very simple sentence I call the ABC coping sentence to help us really use the tools of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, in a practical way. So A, acknowledge, I feel. I feel under pressure. I feel upset. I feel frustrated. B, I feel overwhelmed. B, because I think I'm never going to get ready for Christmas. B, because I think this is so hard. B, because I think I'm letting people down. And I put I think in brackets because it's not always a thought. If I stood on your toe, you'd feel pain if I was beside you. If I stood on your toe now, you'd feel shock. But if I beside you, feel pain. Not because you thought I did, but because I did. But a lot of the time, it's our own thoughts. So when people talk about managing our mental health, actually, it's managing the thoughts that we have. We can't get rid of them, but we can begin to be kinder to them. We can begin to challenge them. We can begin to disbelieve them. So I feel upset because I think everyone else is more organized than me, but, and then the C is choose. And the first one I always use is I choose to breathe slowly, the exercise we did a little while ago. But maybe it's okay. I choose to do the best I can. I choose to get and take help. I choose to ask for support. And something one of the Aware volunteers told me last night, there was a lovely event, and we were chatting on that last night, Annette, but an event for volunteers to mark their massive contribution to Aware, because Aware could not survive in any way without the support and commitment of volunteers. But one of the things the volunteer told me back was about how much she gets from giving. And so I choose to give support. I choose to take care of myself and then give support. So there's lots of different ways. So that's me going off on a tangent. So just going back to the questions for you, Annette. Oh, well, there's one here, and I'm going to answer it by directing the person to a previous webinar we had earlier in the year, which was wonderful. How often is depression and anxiety linked to the menopause? So earlier in the year, we had Dr. Quiva Hartley, and we focus specifically on the menopause. So if the person who asked that doesn't mind answering, looking at that webinar, because all of that's answered there. So somebody's saying, being open is really important for our family as we're supporting a family member with an eating disorder. And the very nature of that illness is secrecy, absolutely. And hiding the illness is just pulling us into the insidious nature of it. So that's really affirming what you said. Advice for someone married with 5 kids with unipolar disorder and OCD. So Annette.
Advice in what sense, really? I suppose there's, I think what you were saying earlier, Claire, is choosing to accept help.
Yes.
Because I'd say coming up to Christmas with 5 children, depending on their ages, there's probably huge expectation. And it's very important not to get overtired, so, maybe make lists of the things that you absolutely have to do and tick them off one at a time, and don't get into a panic. It'll all happen. Christmas Day will happen and you will be ready. But accept help, ask for help. If the children are old enough, give them all their little chores to do and to support you. And I know it can be hard at Christmas if your mood is a little bit off and everybody around you looks to be happy and there's jingle bells and flashing lights and you just don't feel that spirit. So just be kind to yourself and just take it a day at a time and an hour at a time at times, and just do as much as you can.
Yes. And that's so important, Annette. And just adding into that as well, if we each plan one thing to do every day that will give us pleasure, not alcohol related, and it doesn't have to cost money, that can really switch our focus from how difficult things are to one thing that we can do that we'll enjoy. Mm-hmm. And then at night, if we write this sentence down, the thing I did today that I am most proud of is, because it can be very easy for us to look at what we didn't do. And just getting through today, and then tomorrow's the next day and the next day. And maybe changing our expectations about Christmas. We know that Christmas can be challenging, and we don't know what restrictions we might have in the next few weeks because of COVID-19, but we do know we got through last year. And we might have developed new traditions, new ways of greeting friends and neighbors, new ways of celebrating it. So being creative around it. So giving ourselves a break. And also, Annette, SADS, people talk about seasonal affective disorder. So for some people who their moods are great in the summer, they can be taken aback by feeling down. Other people actually who have severe depression might find it easier to be down in the winter because they might think there's less pressure. Whereas in the summer, it can be difficult when everybody else is in good form. So Christmas is an occasion where there's an expectation that we're all in great form, just as you've described. And it can be hard. Got me back to acknowledging that. Annette, we have a few questions here about medication, but I'm going to encourage the people who've asked them to really discuss those with their doctor or their psychiatrist, because we're neither of us are medical professionals. So just to say that. So questions about medication resistance or will they lose effect? So I hope that those people are okay with my responding there. And there were a few others. There was one about a book. It's gone. Somebody just asking to recap the ABC approach. A is acknowledge. So I feel under pressure. B, because I think whatever. And C, I choose to. And can you please repeat the information where we can do the CBT courses? That's me speaking too quickly, so apologies for that. That's all those details are on the Aware website. So they're and we will, thank you, Karen, our backup person has just let me know that we will share links to all the resources mentioned within the webinar under the video. So a link to the webinar with these links will be sent to everybody participating 24 hours after the webinar. And I think I've covered all the questions. Would I just double check, because somebody mentioned a book and I just want to see where it is. That's Karen saying it again. Annette, how are you doing? Is this as bad as you thought it was going to be, or is it okay?
It's okay.
Okay, good. Good. Well, you'll go to bed tonight knowing that you've done something really great. I can't see it, so apologies to the person who mentioned a book. But look, I find with books, it's really whatever. Some books help me, some books don't. Some books I recommend to people and they don't have any answer or they don't do anything for somebody else. So it's really our personal preference. Annette, shining light to this time of year, you're doing that by your very presence and you're doing it by what you're saying. But are there any things that you have found that really are your go-to, so that you would, from everything that you've done, your kind of top 3 things that you recommend?
Make sure that you get enough sleep.
Okay.
Make sure you eat regularly. And as you talked earlier, Claire, about sugar, yeah, it's too easy to be rushing around at this time of the year and maybe trying to do 10 things and suddenly realize, oh, I didn't have lunch, I'll grab a bar of chocolate. And that might give you a lift for a few minutes, but it won't do anything for you in the long term. What I like about this, there's lots of things about this time of the year I don't like. I think this time of the year can be a very sad time of the year. It's a time when people miss people. It's a time where people who are coping with all kinds of conditions and illnesses are struggling. It's a time where people maybe have financial difficulties. But also it can be a time where we make contact with people that we haven't seen or heard of for a long time. And I think that's one of the nice things, to make that call. And particularly over the last couple of years, when a lot of our social contacts have been depleted, just to think about somebody that you haven't seen or heard of in a long time and maybe give them a call and just have a chat. Or if you can, if it's permitted within the COVID restrictions, maybe visit somebody that you haven't seen in a long time, or invite them to meet outdoors for a cup of coffee. And as you were saying earlier too, Claire, do one nice thing for yourself in the day. I mean, okay, I know I haven't written my Christmas cards. I haven't wrapped presents. I've bought some. I know I have to check my list again and do it, and I keep putting it off. but sure, I'll get around to it, because I've learned that there's no point in fussing about it. It'll happen. I'll make time for it. I'll do it. So I'm not going to put myself under pressure. I had things this week that I knew I was doing. There was the Aware get together last night. There was this today. So they were important. So that was where the focus was. The rest will follow.
So Annette, what you're describing is practical kindness. You're demonstrating about being kind to yourself, because the tendency for me is, if I when I procrastinate, to blame myself, to beat myself up. I should have done this. Why didn't I do that? And the being kind, the compassionate, focused approach to recognizing that we're human is so important. And for just thinking, something that's really struck me, particularly over the last year, is the pressure on all of us to be in great form. And sometimes when I'm working with people, I might ask them on a mood scale from 1 to 10, or 0 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 being very low mood, 10 being very high, ideally, where would you like to be on that? And I might ask parents, ideally, where would you like your young person to be on that? And more often than not, people would say 8, 9, 10. And then I explained that, 8, 9, 10 is wonderful to get to, but we cannot stay there. And I draw out the normal curve, the curve of normal distribution, where we have average. So if we're talking about height, 50% of people are in the average range, 25% very tall, 25% very small. So looking at our mood, the average, the way I understand it, is 4, 5, 6. But if we're in 4, 5, 6, and we think we're supposed to be at 7, 8, 9, 10, well, then being in 4, 5, 6 isn't good enough. So we all try to do our best, but generally by becoming addicted to something, whether it's sugar or caffeine or alcohol or pleasing or working too hard or achievement or something. So not doing whatever we've been doing to make us feel better can actually make us feel worse initially. And this is the paradox with the anxiety piece, that getting ourselves, I'm not going to use the word healthy, but getting ourselves in a better frame of mind can actually make us feel worse. So this is going back to you, Annette, the action precedes the pleasure.
Yeah.
What I haven't got that right. Action precedes
motivation.
So doing something, we might feel worse. So that's not a sign that we don't keep doing it, that we do it, and then gradually we'll start to feel better. So there's so much information there in the Aware website. Annette, I'm really struck, a question I meant to ask you earlier. So you're involved with Aware, more years than you can care to remember. What is it that keeps you as enthusiastic, as passionate about Aware and the people who you meet in Aware?
Well, for starters, I always have felt down through the years, it keeps me grounded. It keeps me with a focus on minding my mental health. Also, I have met such incredible people. I mean, the people that you meet in Aware are very special. And I think it's because at some stage they've struggled. They've had challenges. They've had difficulties, be it themselves personally or a family member. And also, I would hate anybody to go through what I went through. And I think, I know now we're in a very different place and it's a different world. And both of us have mentioned the Aware website, and there's tremendous information on the Aware website. And on social media, there's a lot of very positive messages from Aware all the time. That wasn't there back in the early 90s when I was struggling for information. And founder members of Aware, a lovely couple, Julie and Derek, sadly Derek is no longer with us, but I remember Julie at a lecture saying she had a brother living in America and she had so little information here on bipolar that her brother used to send her medical textbooks from the States, and she'd have the medical textbook in one hand and a dictionary in the other hand, because she needed information, because we say information is power, and she needed information to understand bipolar. And, now there's so much information out there and it is so much easier, but I enjoy volunteering with Aware. I now volunteer on the support mail service, And it's something, I'm giving back a little bit.
You're giving back a lot, Annette, and the support mail is for people who want to get support by writing in an email. And then there's a support line where people can phone aware. And then there's the different courses that people can do. And you mentioned bipolar disorder there, Annette, and we're absolutely thrilled to be at the final stage of piloting our new program for people with bipolar disorder called Living Well with Bipolar Disorder. And there's a very important component of that program, which Dr. Declan Lyons has introduced into the program. He's developed it, a very innovative program anyway, but bringing relatives or friends or supporters in as part of that. So we'll be evaluating it over the next few weeks, and then we'll be rolling that out as another one of Aware services starting in the new year. So details of that are on the website as well. Annette, we're just coming towards time. So I'd like to really absolutely thank you and for your courage in presenting yourself. And the term unsung heroes was in my mind before we had this conversation. I'm often struck by how someone becomes an actor and overnight they're worldwide celebrities. And yet there are people who are doing all kinds of incredible things that never get the acknowledgement. So I know you don't want it on your own behalf personally, but I want to give it to you on your own behalf personally, but also on behalf of all of the volunteers, board members, and people who work on all of the different services, to really thank you for your compassion, your support, sharing your time, your expertise, your energy, and your wisdom. So last word to you, Annette. Is there anything that you'd like as a final takeaway?
Don't suffer in silence. Don't suffer on your own. There's always somebody there to help. Oftentimes in groups, I would have heard people say, oh, I don't want to bother my family, or I don't want to worry my family. If you feel that you don't want to worry your family, ring the Aware support line, attend one of the Aware support groups, or email the support mail. Somebody will be there to listen to you. We won't be able to fix it, but we'll be able to offer you some helpful options, which may help you to find whatever it is that you need to get well. But, don't suffer in silence.
Very wise. And the support groups are on Zoom. I forgot to mention that. Annette Byrne, Garmelia Mahagat. Thank you. And we'll just move to January's one. So Karen is going to put up the slide so that we'll have here it goes. Yes. So this is this one, Shining a Light in Depression, and December's one. And then January is not up, so that's okay. So in January, we're going to be looking at the area of nutrition and nurturing mental health. It's okay, Karen, don't worry. It says December, but we know it's January. And it's going to be Wednesday, the 12th of January. So the second Wednesday in every month. It's an easy one to remember, from 12 to 1. Annette, thanks a million.
Thanks a million, Claire. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll leave it there for now. Bye.
Bye.